guess we'll get started, Joe. That's okay. Thank you all for coming this morning. Before we get started, if maybe we could stand to say the pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, again, thank you everyone for coming out this morning. Thank you to the Knights of Columbus for hosting this event and opening up the facility to us and opening this town hall for us to have this listening session. The renovations look great. Last time I was here, this was a completely different building, and it's really coming together very nicely, so I appreciate everything that the Knights of Columbus is doing. And most important, I thank you for coming, to take time out of your busy schedule to spend time with us on this important issue that we face as Americans. And that is the question of Syria. That is the focus of our discussion today. We have done a bunch of these listening tours around the district, and we're starting here in Hornell today. And by the end of this evening, we'll end at Dunkirk to really try to have a conversation about the issue of Syria, your thoughts, your input as to what you believe is the best path to go forward with Syria. We have some material that we're handing out. It's just meant to be some background information, and as well as the proposed resolution that came from the White House in regards to the request of the President to have authority to use our military to go into Syria. Before we open up the conversation, maybe I'll share with you some of my thoughts, some of my initial positions, and where I'm at right now. First and foremost, this is one of the hardest decisions that we have to make in Congress. Because what we're talking about is putting our potential men and women, our sons and daughters, in harm's way when we talk about executing on a military plan, such as what the President is talking about. So I take it very serious. This has been weighing on my mind for some time, and I will tell you, it's kept me up at night, because this is one of those decisions where you really feel the responsibility that's associated with it. And I will tell you that I do appreciate the fact that the President is coming to Congress. We had signed the letter to request the President to get congressional approval on anything that he would do in regards to Syria. I think that's the right call. I believe it's required by our Constitution, and I also believe it's under the War Powers Act, very clear as to what the President should be doing. Now, there have been a lot of questions about why did he not do it in Libya, and why does he do it now in Syria. I'll leave that up for your discussion, for your input. I have some thoughts on that, but obviously we deal with the situation at hand, and the situation at hand that I face is next week when we get to Washington, we will be voting on this request. And as I look at Syria, I'm obviously, personally and emotionally, when you see the photographs of what Assad has done to his own people, to women and children, that is despicable. It's barbaric. It is something where you see those photographs and those reports that make you, as a person, an emotional response occurs. But what I have tried to do is to separate that emotion from looking at what is in the best interest of America and America's interest. And where I'm at right now is that I don't see where the American interest and our national security concern is by authorizing this limited airstrike that the President has requested. I think it is fraught with peril. It has high risk of escalation, because it's not clear to me as to what the next steps are after this attack. What happens if Assad responds? What happens if Iran comes in? What happens if Israel is attacked? What happens if something happens outside of the Middle East? These are all serious questions, and I have not received a formal response nor a plan of how to deal with that. And to me, that's very problematic. On top of the fundamental question is this in our American interest, national security concern to go in and engage in this attack? Now, the critical piece also to this is, what is the path forward in regards to dealing with the issue of chemical weapons? Because I do recognize that the use of chemical weapons is a risk to us in the sense of, if they fall in the wrong hands, if they go outside of Syria, there is a risk that we potentially become targets. And if chemical weapons are used on Americans or American interests, that is a completely different situation. But that is something that we got to consider as we go forward with this, because the counter argument for those who want to go into this strike is, by not acting, you will lose the credibility of the United States, which is the deterrent effect that keeps these weapons of mass destruction on the sideline. Now, that's kind of the sum and substance of the different policies back and forth. And I'll open it up to your input, your thoughts as to what you're thinking. And I really do appreciate that input, because as I truly do believe, when I cast that vote, that's when the final decision will be made. When I stick the card in the box and I vote yes or no, I represent 700,000 plus people. And I want to listen to those people in order to represent them.
Hey, 3 weeks ago I was made an American citizen, and I'm very grateful for that. And some of the things that it was a long time coming, and I came from Canada with my 9 children here in the Canisteo Valley. One of the main reasons that attracted me to the United States was the Constitution and the rights of the people and the rights of free speech. And I do appreciate the opportunity of speaking before you today. And I do appreciate Congressman Reid for his stand against the war in Syria, or even intervention in Syria. Coming from Canada, we find different solutions to the problem. As you know, we're very peace-loving people, but we are highly respected throughout the world, and when we speak, it does make a lot of difference. One of the things I did not see is a lot of dialogue with Russia or China or anyone else getting involved in dialogue and saying we must pressure the elimination of these chemical weapons. They know they exist. They knew back in the time of Iraq war that they did exist. They knew that Libya had them. They knew that Syria had them, and they did nothing. My frustration is to see that at this point in time somebody drew a red line, and now they're caught in a corner and they're trying to weasel out.
And you raise a point on a critical issue. The issue of Russia and China is critical to this situation with Syria. And they are going to be critical in regards to potentially finding a path forward in resolving this issue. And we're very interested. I've been working with some other members about potentially becoming advocates for that type of forum to force Assad and the rebels, because you got 2 sides here that are fighting each other, but have both expressed some opposition to America. Let's leave it at that. So how do you utilize your relationships with Russia and China to put pressure on Syria to turn over the chemical weapons and make sure that they pledge never to get them again? That is a path that I think is potentially before us to explore. Sir?
Chemical weapons, offer to buy the weapons. Give them the cash, no strings attached. We get the weapons, we guarantee that they're destroyed. Take the chemical weapons out of the situation. I mean, we don't want to get into a full-scale war. The main issue that we're focusing on right now is chemical weapons, offer to buy it. Everybody else is out saying surrender them, give them up. He's given up a main asset. If it comes down to he just takes the money and buys conventional weapons, at least we got rid of the chemicals.
Is the construction of chemical weapons, and the ability to do that is something that is, if the infrastructure is there, it can be done. Let's say it that way. And the reason why Syria didn't sign the international agreement because obviously they wanted to have the ability to produce those chemical weapons. So I offer that as a potential further thought to think of the next step. If we buy the chemical weapons, will they then just replace them with more chemical weapons and have an endless supply of money coming in order to acquire those from them? So it's something that I appreciate the input. Those are the creative ideas that we love doing these listening sessions and these town halls from, because those are the things that we want to bring back to Washington.
Devil's in the details. Get that in there, you can't produce anymore.
And that's with a pledge. That's we're working with potential diplomatic relations with Russia and China and others, potentially to get the pledge from Syria, and Syria in a power share arrangement or some other sort of arrangement that resolves this. It guarantees that you say, not only will you turn your present chemical weapons over, you pledge not to acquire them again, which is a different standing upon which we could then go forward.
Okay.
But I appreciate that.
Sir, in the quorum, he has any
Good morning, Congressman Reed. Welcome to Hornell. You know you're all.
Thank you.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. When the Civil War, since it started, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, murdered, slaughtered. Why didn't the government do anything about it then? Why must they wait until he crossed the red line with sarin gas? And how do we know, and every veteran in this room will tell you, how do we know the rebels didn't use that gas to make it look? Do they have proof that Assad actually did that? Or the rebels could have done that to make us, draw us in. And as you know, the rebels are backed by Al-Qaeda. You know, they're our friends, right? So you got to think about that too.
We have to understand who's fighting who here, and who are the potential sides that we are potentially aligning ourselves with these airstrikes. And as to the intelligence as to whether Assad utilized chemical weapons, I am of the opinion, looking at all the data and the information that's been shared with me, is that he did use chemical weapons. And if it's not him directly, it was top-level military officials who he's responsible for, who made that decision. Because that is a little bit of a gray area in the sense of where the chain of command was. Was there a breakdown in chain of command? But because he's the representative of that government, it's clear to me that he's responsible for that action. Now, there have been allegations of the rebels utilizing chemical weapons, as you are noting, and that is a legitimate concern. And that also causes me pause as we decide who are we empowering as a result of this potential request to go in with these limited airstrikes. Balance it out.
Say we go in there and we dismantle his capability of delivering chemical weapons now, and God forbid it doesn't start World War III. What's to keep Assad from doing this 2 years from now all over again? In other words, is there any option on Mr. Obama's table to take out Assad?
And the answer to that is no. The clear indications from the White House is that this is a limited airstrike that is designed to send a message to Assad. Not remove him, not change the level of the battlefield on the ground. That is a risk of what he's requesting, is that if you're just going to, I don't want to use simple analogies, but maybe it's appropriate, stick your finger in the beehive, and you're not going to take out the beehive, what have you done? You've stirred the whole pot up. And that is a concern I have, and that's one of the reasons why we're potentially, why we're leaning to no on this resolution. Now that debate is happening, just so everyone's aware of it. That debate is happening in Washington in the sense of, look at, probably what they're saying is maybe we should consider the authorization to go all in and take out the entire regime and do a nation-building effort and a regime change. There is a voice in Washington that is talking about that. We're not interested in that. We're not supportive of that. But that is part of this debate. And I will say that probably it's not going to carry the day. But there is some thought process out there. If you're going to do it, do it. So I just offer that as a potential debate down the road. Because I'm trying to think, one of the toughest parts of this job is you just can't think about this vote and without thinking about the next 12 votes that are potentially ahead of you. And those are the concerns that we got to continue to take into consideration. Ma'am?
Can the president act without Congress's blessing? Can he go independently and order this done?
I believe that the Constitution is clear, that he needs to come to Congress and get that authority. And now, have presidents disregarded that? Yes. Is there a provision that can be utilized to say that if there's an imminent threat to America and America's interest, that can be utilized without congressional oversight? I don't believe that's the case here. And that's where I believe the right call is to come to Congress for the approval. What you're touching on is going to be something that I don't want to speculate on at this point in time. But if we do not authorize this request, does the president unilaterally go in, even though Congress is acting? And that is something for the president to decide. Obviously, if we say no, I would hope the president needs that congressional oversight.
Consequences if you said no.
If he overrode Congress
Right.
and did it
Then we
unilaterally?
just sit back and say, "Aw," and we just hear another promise. You know, I've listened to all this stuff. I know what side I'm on right now. I want Congress not accept this war. Period.
Very clear. And that's consistent across these town halls, and also, as an aside point, we are trying to get input not only by physically coming out and holding these town hall listening sessions. If you know of anybody who wants to weigh in, please go to our Facebook, social media, email, call the offices. I've gotten calls at home. I mean, I don't mind that. It's whatever it is, whatever we're talking about.
Read.house.gov has the access to all of our phone and email and social media outlets. Read.house.gov. And the response at this point, I've talked to my staff in the district. They've been receiving an overwhelming number of phone calls. I've received stuff to my personal email. I know Tom's gotten calls at home, and this has been something. And I'll let people know that the calls in have been consistent with what we see here, what we see in the other town hall meetings, with a large, overwhelming proportion of you. I appreciate it. Sir, I had a hand up for quite a while.
If you would do two things, and I'll tell you what they are as soon as I tell you what I'm going to talk about. 20 years ago, Colin Powell set up something called the Powell Doctrine, an indication of what had to be done before we go to war in foreign countries. A list of questions, all of which had to be answered and answered yes. Is it in our national interest to do this? Oh, I got it written down here. Do we have a clear objective in our military stuff? Is there a withdrawal strategy so we don't get sucked in endlessly like we have in other wars? Are the American people supporting this? And are the other countries of the world supporting this? And I'm not sure the answers to any of these are yes, but I'd like to ask two things. Would you bring General Powell to Congress and ask him these questions? Because to tell you the truth, I trust him a whole lot more than I trust John Kerry or John McCain or John Boehner. And General Powell tells me that going to war in Syria is in our national interest, and we've got all the, and he can do that. I feel a whole lot better, and if he says we are not supposed to be there, according to his own doctrine, then that's that. The other thing I'd like to ask you, would you ask President Obama to go on television, like Kennedy did during the Cuban Missile Crisis and other presidents have done, and talk to the American people? And I don't mean Oprah, and I don't mean Leno, and I don't mean The View. I mean half an hour of primetime TV and talk to us. You know, I mean, he's not real good at coming down from Mount Olympus and talking to ordinary people, but I'd like to hear him tell me why we have to go to war over there. If he would do that. Would you ask him to do that, please?
And that came up yesterday at a town hall in Owego. And that is a great suggestion for the president to have to come on TV and address us and say, this is why we need to go to war in Syria. And I think that's a reasonable request. And what I think I will further add to that, and we'll work on sending this request over, is you either come to Congress, invite him to Congress. I'll ask the Speaker to invite him over to Congress, or just come on. No, I'm talking about the President right now. or go on TV and give a speech and tell us why we need to answer these questions as to why we need to go into Syria. And then we immediately, if you do that, we will schedule the vote in the House the following morning. To me, that's
the General Powell idea.
the General Powell idea. I mean, obviously, I have a lot of respect for General Powell, and we'll reach out to his office and see what his thoughts are. I have not seen him weigh in on this as of yet, so I don't know where he's at, if he's even engaged in the debate. But we can see what we can do to try to track him down and get that input. But the questions you ask are the exact questions I think we all should ask as American citizens when we talk about going into war, and in particular in regards to Syria. Because when you go through that analysis, to me, I think I know where I stand. And I think I join with all of you in saying those answers have not been in the affirmative, so therefore, let us not go in.
Thank you.
Mr. Montana.
Yes, could you articulate the argument again, why it is America's interest to halt chemical weapons? Because I can buy that argument. I don't want to intervene with Syria, but that's an argument that you have to pay attention to, because it doesn't matter what we care about Syria, Lebanon, Libya, or any of those. I mean, from Thomas Jefferson, we would already listen to the Marine Corps again, you know. But is it in our interest to stop chemical warfare wherever it is?
The gentleman's asking the question, could you articulate the concern about the chemical weapons themselves and the fact of us not engaging and attacking the issue of chemical weapons? It's a legitimate concern, because what you then run, and this is the analysis, or this is the thought process on the other side of the position that we've explored and debated and discussed, and also internally I've thoroughly reviewed, is by doing nothing. What you send is the message to the individual who possesses weapons of mass destruction that the United States will allow you to kill 100,000 plus people, allow you to utilize chemical weapons, women and children, and there will be no penalty when you do that. That is a serious problem in the sense of what has kept a lot of these dictators, leaders, folks who are not friends of America on the sidelines of using chemical weapons and other weapons of mass destruction, is that deterrent effect of, if we do, America will respond. That is the quagmire that I face. That is the debate. That is the issue, to me, that this is boiled down to. And when you look at it, however, the risk of destabilizing the entire area, the risk of intervening in Syria and uniting the rebels and Assad, the Sunni and the Shiite factions against America and Israel, and that destabilization effect could cause the likelihood of chemical weapons to be utilized in that scenario a higher probability, because they will say, it is time. We now unite. The true enemy is Israel and America, and let's go all in. And that's the nightmare scenario that I'm talking about as to why we're voting no on this resolution. But it is a serious problem. And the serious problem was exacerbated with the foolish, and I'll say it right out loud, the foolish statement of drawing a red line and not having a strategy and a policy to deal with the fact when it was crossed.
Yeah, I'm glad this discussion is going this way. Stability is what came up. And what my proposal is that we've made some strategic bad decisions, one of which is to pull those aircraft carrier group, the aircraft carrier group, out of the Eastern Mediterranean. I think we should get one in there right as fast as we can and keep one there all the time, mainly to get more stability there. Then we can do some negotiating. But this business about using teleprompters and speeches and all that sounds good, but it's not going to work unless you've got stability. That's what I believe.
your strategy to the enemy, you know, what are you going to do? Changing your strategy, then you're going to let them know ahead of time?
Oh, yeah.
You know, it
That's
makes
it.
no sense to me at all. If we're going to do this on a limited basis, we're going to hit Benghazi, you know, we're going to go all over here, we're going to bomb the cities that had the weapons. Well, guess what? The weapons aren't there anymore. I mean, they're probably 5 miles underground. You know, why would you give away all your strategy? I mean, that's no strategy.
I agree. Because the other scenario that we got to keep in mind, and this is something that made into my calculation and is continuing to weigh in my calculation, is obviously by putting this strategy out for public consumption and worldwide consumption, if you are an individual like Assad, who's already demonstrated that you will use chemical weapons on women and children, would you not take all the women and children that you could control in your country and put them in the military targets so that when these bombs come down, you are hitting women and children, and then you parade those pictures of women and children that have been killed by American missiles and American bombs across the world? What kind of effect would that propaganda have on this risk of escalation? That is something that clearly has to be taken into consideration. Joe, I'll let you.
Yeah, we'll do these two rows of Mr. Davidson.
I served in the Air Force for 39 months, and I was stationed for 3 years in Aviano, which is 60 miles from Yugoslavia, or where the Yugoslavia was, and we had the problem, and we had a president who he himself had served in the military, and he knew that it is not something that you should casually send our troops into harm's way. And don't tell me that you have to have your boots on the ground, because they can shoot you out of the sky just as easily. And I believe that this president has no idea he's just playing chess with our military.
I'm not much of an orator, but those people over there have lived under dictatorships and such likes of that for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years. And my question to you is this, is when is the United States of America going to learn that you can't make democracies in the Middle East? It won't work. And every time we win, we're going to make a democracy out of this one. We're going to make a democracy out of something. Get peace there to let them live the way they want to live.
I appreciate that. And that is one of the reasons I've said from the get-go of us running for Congress and being in Congress, I am not a supporter of nation building, using American resources and American military for nation building, because that's the exact problem that you find yourself in when you engage in that policy. What I am a firm believer in is we need to have platforms and relations around the world upon which we can strike when we identify a threat and annihilate that threat on non-American soil before it comes to American soil. That, to me, should be the mission. That, to me, has national security implications. That, to me, is what will protect Americans long term, as opposed to being the world's policeman and going in and building nations and regimes. So I appreciate that input.
It
That's
don't
something I
work.
always have in my
It just
mind.
don't work.
I just want to say that I understand with Syria, we don't want women and children, we don't want anybody to die. But what I feel is the Boston, the intelligence broke down there. My brother-in-law was hurt terribly in the First World Trade bombing here. We have to fix our country and our intelligence before we even get into another war, because they are going to attack us. They are going to strike here. I just feel it that they will. I don't want other people hurt in other countries, but we have to protect our homeland. We have to. We have to fix their intelligence.
Appreciate that. And that's something we're working on. Because you're absolutely right.
Just one message for Obama. He doesn't have the right to act as judge, jury, and executioner.
Thanks for coming to Hornell. Appreciate it. I sent out a mass email to my constituents to let them know about the meeting, and I see some made it, a few that didn't responded to my email, and they wanted me to convey to you, to each person that responded was against a missile strike or military action of any kind. And I echo those thoughts. And my thought is, okay, Assad doesn't like us. If we get rid of him, we're going to replace him with what? A regime who doesn't like us. An attack on Syria will do two things. Put Israel at immediate risk. It'll spike gas prices. How does that benefit us? Instead of kickstarting another war abroad, how about we kickstart the economy here and grow jobs?
Ever since World War II, the military has been at war ever since then. They went into Vietnam,
Right.
Korea, Kuwait, Iraq. There's nothing been resolved. And it continues to put money. Look at the thousands of lives that's been lost because we think we're doing something. We're not doing anything except spending our men's lives.
And our money.
That's all it is. Now, who's right? Do Assad put in these chemicals, or the rebels to make us go in? And why is it always up to the United States to take care of it? What's the matter with the rest of the world?
That's right.
We cannot solve Middle East problems. They've got to solve their own.
I appreciate that.
I remember being a young pregnant lady with our first child, and John F. Kennedy coming on the TV and announcing that we may go to war. I questioned highly, why was I bringing a child into this world? And what kind of legacy was I going to give this child once he arrived, or she? I think we need to work towards containment that leads to elimination of any type of mass destruction weapon, whether it be bombs, like we did on Pearl Harbor. That was one. It sent a message to the world. The world isn't the same world today that the H-bomb was dropped on. We have these little mini flare-ups, and as everyone has said, the Middle East has fought with themselves for so long. It is part of their culture. They don't even have any concept or any desire to become a democracy. They would like to live in peace. I think that's what we need to work forward. Containment that leads to elimination. And let each individual country decide how they can live in peace, be it under an ology, a democracy, or a dictatorship.
The politics of oil is what drives a lot of this decision making. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I'm not going to tell you that that's not part of some of the conversations that we've had over the last few weeks on these issues. Because, and John, you touched upon it too, in regards to what will happen at the gas pump here in America if this escalates and destabilizes the region.
Oil's already taken off now.
Absolutely, we're already seeing it. And that is where, when we talk about an energy policy, when I talk about an all of the above comprehensive energy policy, we've been supportive of natural gas development here in America. We've been talking about developing our oil reserves. It's not only just about the jobs and the economic prosperity that comes from that, it's also a national security implication. And the sooner we become energy independent, the stronger we will be when it comes to these issues.
But I've done a little talking to people, obviously, in the town that I represent, and I've stopped at the American Legion, talked to the veterans and everything else, and I think your point is well made, that the what ifs. And as that gentleman said in his list of questions that needed to be answered, I think that's pretty uniform throughout our region, that people say, it's not a matter of going to war, it's should we be the world's policemen? Should we be the ones that stand up for everything that's wrong in the world and go it alone just because other countries won't support us? So I think you're right on track. My people that I represent definitely want you to vote no, and I think that you're going to get that pretty much everywhere you go.
With all the talent we have in the United States, the chemists, the research people, we can identify these gases, and way back in Vietnam, we had an antidote for nerve gas. It was atropine. And we got to have some kind of an antidote for just about anything they can throw at your people. Can't we put the money that this fellow talked about and the identification of the gases that this gentleman talked about, put those efforts together and discover and distribute this antidote and save lives, and keep in the background and have the appearance of doing good instead of evil?
I appreciate it. That's a great idea. I'll look into that.
A few years ago, I went to a town meeting held by your illustrious predecessor, Eric Massa, and it was at the Cornell School, and he proudly proclaimed that he had voted against Obamacare, and he had told her that he was going to. I assume you meant Nancy Pelosi. But if John Boehner tells you that you ought to vote in favor of military intervention, aren't you in the same boat that he was?
Yeah, and the speaker has come out, and the leader has come out in support of the request. And I will tell you, I respect their opinion, I respect their decision, but that is not going to change my decision. I represent 700,000 plus people of Western New York, my home, and I'm going to bring their voice to Washington. And what I'm hearing and what I believe is the no vote is the right path going forward.
He's a civilian now.
Well, I believe that we have a responsibility in this job.
Okay.
And if you are only concerned about retaining this job, then you don't need to be in Washington, D.C. And that is not my priority.
Thank you. Here's what I wanted you to say.
More of these Tuesday, we have time for a couple more questions before we move on to Olean. Ma'am.
Well, first I was a history teacher. I remember the history of the United States, and there was a legislative, executive, and judicial authority. And all I can see is a sort of a usurping of all that position by one individual as the president. And I feel that I'm surprised the Congress, whatever reasoning, at times has gone along with them. And I feel that it's time that they stood up for the American people. And I'm glad to hear you today to ask our opinions. Because going to war is a serious involvement. And it not only involves you that day, it involves the rest of the world as well. So you don't deal in the world and you don't give democracy to countries that don't want it. And you're arrogant to think that yours is the only way. So, no vote. No vote. No vote.
Very wise.
One last question. Maybe somebody hasn't spoken, hasn't had a chance to speak yet.
I would just like to ask you a question, sir. Is the use of chemical weapons a violation of either the Geneva Convention or any other treaty that our country is signatory to?
The use of chemical weapons is, by international standards and law, a violation of those international standards.
So if the information upon which the decision is made is verified, there would be some legal justification for it.
There would be a basis, a legitimate basis, for the ability to go in and utilize that force. But the point that's been made repeatedly here is who is the policeman in order to enforce that international law. And as Colin Powell had indicated, if it's an international law, why isn't it not an international body and an international military action that is coming together to enforce that law? To me, that's the question that still is outstanding.
Well, we did it a little bit earlier, but we do have to do it at the end of each of these. The first year we did this. Show of hands, people that are willing to state their opinion. All those who are in favor of authorizing the use of force against the Republic of Syria, please raise your hand. Okay. All those against? There we go.
Well, thank you very much for coming. This is very important to me. And